Good evening, I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Andrew is away. Tonight, a coronavirus variant tears through Newfoundland.
Healthcare workers have been stepping up. We're having people in retirement, we've had injured workers.
The signs of strain already showing. Also tonight, the outcry against proposed changes to Canada's law on medical assistance in dying.
We need free therapy before we can offer people death as a form of therapy.
The crackdown in Myanmar intensifies.
We will definitely see the bloodshed and the killing.
And the U.S. gets some unusual snow and some historic lows.
Who would think it'd be snowing in Texas?
Parts of Canada may want to brace for impact. This is The National. If a third wave of COVID-19 hits this country, the conditions helping it along are in front of us now. Slower than desired vaccinations, loosened restrictions, and aggressive COVID-19 variants now in all 10 provinces. Some 500 to 1,000 of those variant cases reported so far, and 4 provinces with community spread of at least one of the variants. And tonight, Newfoundland shows just how quickly things can go badly. As Chris O'Neill-Yates shows us, there is a COVID-19 crisis in all of its public health regions.
A rush is on for testing.
The public health laboratory is running at full capacity, and we are processing record numbers of tests a day.
The outbreak of the variant that first emerged in the UK has everyone on edge, especially now that it's spread to every region of Newfoundland, though not yet to Labrador.
Our members are stressed. People are fearful too.
More than 500 healthcare workers across the province are in isolation, and so
We're depending on retirees to come back and help out with the swabbing clinics, with the vaccinations, and we're also depending on some of our members who are working full-time and volunteering on top of that.
today the first person was hospitalized because of the variant, but room is being made for more.
Healthcare workers have been stepping up. We're having people in retirement, we've had injured workers actually reach out and say, if you need me to do something, let me know.
All of that on the first day back to virtual learning for all students since last spring.
We fully anticipate that there may be some bumps in the road in the early days of this transition.
Parents expect bumps too as they readjust.
She did this, she did that.
James Can works and Julie White studies at home. Now their 10 and 12-year-old daughters have joined them.
It's really about managing the time and making sure we take care of ourselves so that we're not getting angry with each other. I find that that's probably going to be the hardest part.
Fitzgerald expects more cases for weeks to come, even though this province had the strictest border closure in the country.
This variant of this virus still managed to get in here, and it still managed to find this place and to spread very efficiently.
A 50-fold increase from 6 to 298 cases in just over a week. Chris O'Neill-Yates, CBC News, St. John's.
Now, if the variant concern in Newfoundland is region-wide, in Ontario tonight the worry is focused on a concentrated new cluster. Officials are scrambling to contain an outbreak inside a densely populated Mississauga condo building. Matt Galloway was there.
Floor by floor, COVID testing continues at this Mississauga condo.
I'm very concerned. I have a little baby.
Now she's preparing to get the test after health officials linked 5 cases of the virus variant first found in South Africa to her building.
The cases involved do not appear to know each other, have not appeared to have significant close contact.
This region had its first case of this virus variant earlier this month. That is now linked to this cluster. As for what's causing the spread of the virus in the condo,
we're thinking at this point in time, just the idea that people may have shared an elevator together, or they may have passed each other in the corridor.
He says the ventilation system was looked at, but they're focusing on those other common areas.
Risk factor.
This expert says in some buildings, airflow may be a factor.
Air flows, between different units. It also flows through something like the hallways. The issue is perhaps that air could contain droplets or particles that have the virus in them.
There's no evidence of that here right now, but variants of the virus have popped up in every province. The evidence suggests the one first found in the UK is more transmissible and possibly more deadly.
The escape of these variants in a very broad way into the general population would be something of concern.
At the condo in Mississauga, this resident is keeping calm and carrying on.
All you can do is, like I say, wear your mask, social distance, and hope that it's a mild case, that they're mild cases.
The building's management says public health already determined it has extreme safety measures in place, but it is always open to more. Meanwhile, COVID testing on site continues into the night. Magda Gebrselassie, CBC News, Mississauga, Ontario.
The owner of an Alberta meat processing plant says it will temporarily close it amidst a rapidly growing COVID-19 outbreak. This move comes after the death of a 35-year-old was linked to the surging outbreak at the Olymel plant in Red Deer. So far, 326 cases have been linked to that plant. The union, representing more than 1,800 workers, had demanded the company and the province shut it down. On the vaccine front, there are new recommendations on who should be prioritized in the second stage of vaccinations. Canada's National Advisory Committee on Immunization says this should include adults from racialized communities who've been disproportionately affected by the pandemic. The second stage is expected to start this spring, should also cover those who are between 60 and 69 years old. And starting today, all non-essential travelers entering the country across a land border will need to provide a negative COVID test or risk a hefty fine. Starting next week, those crossing that way will get tested upon arrival. The Canadian Armed Forces will help set up screening centers. And right now, 150 million Americans are under a weather alert. A huge winter storm is bringing freezing cold temperatures to U.S. states as far south as Texas. Just look at how big this weather system is, stretching across dozens of states and tracking into Canada, with snow and freezing rain causing traffic pileups in places not used to that across southern states from Oklahoma to Kentucky. Susan Ormiston takes us through it.
A heart-stopping scene on an ice-covered highway. More extraordinary because this is Texas. Heavy snow at the Alamo. The entire state under a federal emergency tonight.
Who would think it'd be snowing in Texas, where you wake up in the morning and see nothing but snow, and it's so cold?
Galveston, on the Gulf Coast, more used to hurricanes, could see worse damage from ice. Over 3 million Texans without power in the path of the worst winter storm in 3 decades.
Water was gone at 8:30, power was off. We're all obviously one of millions in the same boat as everybody in Houston, and it's cold.
Storms are causing perilous conditions for 150 million people across 38 states.
We at Emergency Management are asking our citizens, wherever you are currently, please do not move from that spot until at least Tuesday.
This is Tennessee, near Nashville. Just sliding away on black ice. Arkansas woke up to whiteouts. The frigid weather sweeping down from the North Pole via Siberia. Cold air colliding with warmer, wetter air, causing this multi-vehicle crash in Oklahoma. In Oregon, ice snapped trees. Seattle got so much snow it piled up on the observation deck at the Space Needle.
What we have on the inside observation deck, since it's open air, we actually have to shovel that and hand bring it down through our elevators.
A second storm system is now bearing down midweek from Florida right up to Connecticut.
Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, it could be a disaster. Everything's going to be a sheet of ice. My customers aren't going to be happy with me because I can't get salt to provide for them.
These images, familiar to Canadians, but a bitter shock to millions of Americans. A mass vaccine site in Texas deserted, and worse weather coming, says Houston's mayor.
Tonight will be more treacherous than last night. In the morning will be colder than this morning.
But as we know, winter has its charms. And on this President's Day, Southerners are finding that out. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Washington.
Following the acquittal of former President Donald Trump by the Senate, U.S. lawmakers say they will create an independent commission to investigate the January 6th attacks on the Capitol.
USA! USA! USA!
In a letter to Congress, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the commission will review the facts and the causes that led to the attack. Pelosi says the commission will be modeled on a similar one that happened after 9/11. Myanmar's military is stepping up its pressure on protesters in the wake of the recent coup. Renee Filipponi shows us a country where exuberance on the streets during the day turns into fear when the sun goes down.
The youthful energy of this exuberant crowd nearly disguises the threat they face for being here, protesting the military coup in Myanmar. This group of musicians have banded together to share a message of defiance. 28-year-old digital marketer Nini Nai believes the dictatorship will destroy his dreams.
We have a future. We are young. We have a future. We have a dream.
Many are too young to know firsthand the violent crackdowns on past democratic uprising. But Puden Dao Zhou understands the risk. I'm stressed and not eating, she says, and explains she can't sleep after watching videos of people getting arrested at night. It's under the cover of darkness the military stepped up its enforcement in Kachin State. Dozens of rounds are heard, but it's unclear if it's live ammo or rubber bullets. The military is shutting down the internet at night, and this human rights researcher says that's when things are most dangerous.
In the daytime, we can document and record every action of whatever they committed. But at night, without light, hard to do a photo shot and video recording. That's why they are doing more crazy and aggressive arrests in during the nighttime.
But there was also an increased show of force during the day. Video on social media shows protesters running away from military forces in Mandalay, where there were reports of injuries today. And tanks are now rolling through major cities. The coup leader says they're trying to proceed softly, but effective action will be taken against those harming the country.
That is just the beginning, but later we will definitely see the bloodshed and the killing. That's why right now international community have a great potential to prevent such atrocity.
With military vehicles back on the streets of Yangon for a second night and another internet blackout, tensions are rising. Renee Filipponi, CBC News, London.
Today, at least 57 countries joined a Canadian initiative to try to stop governments from arbitrarily detaining foreign citizens for political purposes.
What we're doing with this initial declaration is trying to put pressure on countries that do it and to tell them that this is totally unacceptable.
The group may eventually push for sanctions against offending countries. It took a year of quiet diplomacy just to arrange this declaration. And countries taking part didn't name names. But a human rights group did mention the two Canadians held in China for nearly 800 days, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. In response, China's embassy called Canada's arrest of Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou entirely political. A deadline fast approaches for the government to update the law on medical assistance in dying. A Quebec court decision forced the Liberals to loosen restrictions, but then the Senate amended the bill to loosen restrictions even further. Olivia Stefanovich looks at what it could mean for people with mental health challenges.
For me and for my husband, it meant relief from suffering.
For Barbara Garlock, accessing medically assisted dying was an act of love on her part and her late husband's.
I have never regretted that was the decision that was made.
Garlock says her husband Gail's quality of life was deteriorating due to dementia, and they were forced to look for new doctors to consent to the request after being turned down by another who didn't believe Gail met the criteria.
I believe the issue of MAID is profoundly personal.
Now the Senate is proposing to let people make their request before dementia takes away their ability to consent.
As someone with a history of dementia in my family, I seek the peace of mind that an advance request and consent to it will provide.
Another Senate amendment affects the proposed ban on assisted dying for people suffering solely from mental illness. The ban would only last 18 months.
We need free therapy before we can offer people death as a form of therapy.
Disability advocates are calling for more safeguards to protect people who lack mental health support.
I get worried about people right now in this pandemic who are experiencing extreme poverty, who are experiencing extreme hardship and don't have any resources and will choose death as a solution because it's the only option that they can see or put their hands on.
Meanwhile, Garlock is also concerned that the changes the Senate proposed won't pass in the House of Commons.
My heart breaks for anyone who is made to suffer one more day than needed.
So, Olivia, the Senate debate ends tomorrow. The bill then goes back to MPs, and then what?
Adrian, the government will only have about 10 days to pass this bill into law. The court-imposed deadline is February 26th. Opposition parties have expressed doubts about those Senate changes, and the government says it's waiting to see the whole revised bill. A decision could come as early as Thursday after cabinet meets. Adrian?
All right, we'll be watching. Olivia Stefanovic, thanks for this. A Quebec coroner will rule tomorrow on a motion by the owners of a Montreal long-term care facility to delay an inquiry into Quebec care homes. But a lawyer for families of several people who died at the facility say it is in the public interest to move ahead sooner rather than later.
So it is an extremely important step of a process in coming to answer questions regarding what I would call a national tragedy that happened there.
Almost 50 people died at Heron during the first wave of the pandemic when there were reports of gross neglect. It was one of Quebec's hardest hit care homes. A Toronto team initiative is trying a new treatment to help people who are at higher risk of COVID-19. It's called social prescribing. Vicadopia now on how it works by redefining what healthcare means for some.
As a senior with diabetes, Brian Smith is at high risk of severe illness if he gets COVID-19. Worried after someone in his building tested positive, he went to a pop-up testing site and left with a prescription for deliveries of free, nutritious food.
It did address the lack of my ability to get fresh fruit and vegetables. It means that I don't have to dig into my limited pension income to do this.
Healthcare workers referred Smith to this Toronto nonprofit dedicated to alleviating food insecurity.
The same folks during the pandemic who are being impacted most as were impacted previously. And so this project is set up and is structured to try to help to provide support to those folks who are facing the most barriers.
The free produce is just part of a new program that uses hospitals, pop-up testing sites, mobile health teams, and other community partners to identify people with inequities that underpin poor health outcomes.
Bi-weekly food delivery for a limited period of time is not the solution to food insecurity, but what it does do is it allows people a little bit of breathing room.
When you're filing your taxes.
Breathing room that includes financial counseling for those with precarious or low incomes, a major risk factor for poorer health. Same with inadequate housing. Homeless people frequently end up in hospital, so workers try to find them a room. One of the program's architects says all Canadian hospitals should also rethink their delivery of health care this way.
To see these people as underserved, not high needs, not vulnerable, not being people who are frequent flyers as if they're trying to use and game the system, but acknowledging that the system has been broken.
The consequences of which Buzari says the pandemic has laid bare. Vicadopia, CBC News, Toronto.
There is concern tonight over the number of seniors who rely on sleeping pills.
Next thing I knew, I was in this grass, and I didn't know how I got there.
Next on The National, which province uses pills the most and what you can do for a better sleep. And it is the fastest vaccine rollout in the world. How did Israel vaccinate so many people so quickly?
We've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic.
And for years, Bill Gates warned the world was not ready for a pandemic.
There were mistakes made when we didn't get ready before the pandemic hit.
Why he says it is time to talk about another global crisis. We're back in 2. Welcome back. It seems a lot of seniors in New Brunswick are trying hard to avoid tossing and turning at night. A new study shows they're using sleeping pills far more than people in other parts of Canada. And as Kayla Hounsel reports, the study recommends giving those prescriptions a rest.
Ken Gallant has much more energy these days. A couple of years ago, he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression.
My sleep was real bad. A good night's sleep for me at that time was probably about 3 hours.
He was prescribed medication for sleeping and anxiety, but he says there were side effects, like driving on a busy St. John street when everything went blurry.
I was passing out. All of a sudden I looked at the traffic light and it was zooming in and out in my eyes. And I started shaking. Next thing I knew, I was in this grass, and I didn't know how I got there.
He also worried about addiction and decided to be weaned off the pills. That's what this researcher is hoping to help other New Brunswick seniors achieve.
Whenever I have a bad night's sleep, I just feel like the next day is going to be awful, and I know it's a highly prevalent concern across all of society.
More seniors in New Brunswick use sleeping pills than anywhere else in Canada. 24% of them, compared to the national average of 7%. It's not clear why, but Gardner has launched a study sending information to seniors in the province to see if they will choose a cognitive behavior therapy instead of sleeping pills.
It's really a suite of strategies that you can learn over usually a 6-week period where you can get a better relationship with your bed and sleep again.
Gallant now walks 4 kilometers a day since coming off the pills entirely. He wasn't part of the research, but he and his wife welcome it.
I think it's fantastic because there are other ways, and I think our problem is we don't have the knowledge, and we need to be educated. And if we knew other ways of dealing with it, we would.
Gallant says the days are no longer passing him by while he's in bed. He hopes the new study will help other seniors find the same quality of life he now enjoys. Kayla Hounsel, CBC News, Halifax.
So getting a good night's sleep under regular conditions can be hard enough, but what about during a pandemic? Psychologist Rebecca Robillard is with the University of Ottawa, a sleep scientist. Thank you for helping us all out here, because talking about sleep sort of feels like a pandemic preoccupation now. We know that stress can have a huge impact on our sleep, but what is it that's different about pandemic stress that's affecting our sleep?
I guess the fact that the pandemic is affecting our lives in so many different ways, it's not just a single stressor, it's a multi-dimensional stressor. So for example, the fact that this also spans across such a sustained period of time, we're bringing on the pill a lot of new worries about our family members being healthy or not, about financial pressures and all sorts of worries that are new.
And what about our habits when it comes to working from home? How much, for those who are working from home, how much do the shifts in those habits affect our sleep?
So that certainly creates a new routine for us. And our biological clock, which also regulates our sleep-wake cycle, is very, very sensitive to our routine. And so, for example, our social interactions, a lot of which come from work, as well as our daily light exposures, are two of the main factors that will kind of help anchor our biological clock in a stable time.
So rather than just focus on why people aren't sleeping well, can you offer us some tips for how it can get better?
So it's helpful to maintain a regular sleep-wake schedule, both in terms of bedtime, but also wake-up time. Stay active, especially doing cardiovascular activities can help. Also minimizing the light that we're exposed to in the evening, so contains the computers, tablets, phones, televisions, but try to boost up light in the morning, so try to get some sunshine in the morning.
Always a good idea. Thank you very much. Sleep scientist and psychologist Rebecca Robillard.
Thank you. Sleep well.
We'll try. Next, a Canadian exclusive with Bill Gates.
Well, there were mistakes made when we didn't get ready before the pandemic hit.
What he hopes the world learned from this pandemic that could help us prepare for the next one. And later, would you pay more for your groceries if it was better for the environment? Welcome back. Few could say they predicted what the world has faced this past year, but Bill Gates saw it coming. As early as 2015, the Microsoft co-founder was sounding the alarm about a pandemic. And now he's shining a light on another major global issue. In an exclusive Canadian broadcast interview, he spoke with Matt Galloway, host of CBC Radio's The Current.
We've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic.
In 2015, Bill Gates gave a TED Talk where he warned us about a coming pandemic, that we were not ready.
We need to do simulations, germ games, not war games, so that we see where the holes are. The last time a germ game was done in the United States was back in 2001, and it didn't go so well.
To be fair, he was not alone in questioning our preparedness for a pandemic, but he has put his money where his mouth is. His foundation is giving nearly $2 billion to the global fight against COVID. And if that's not enough to keep him busy, he has a new book out on how to combat another ongoing crisis, global warming. Bill Gates recently joined me to discuss the fight against both. We are, I don't need to tell you this, in the midst of this global health emergency right now. Explain to me why now is the time to put out a book on climate change and fighting climate change.
The pandemic reminds people we count on government to look ahead, avoid terrible things happening. And amazingly, young people are more interested in climate than ever, no matter what their political affiliation is. Certainly in Canada, the US, Europe, we see a lot of energy around this. And so my book is about what kind of plan would make that come true.
You describe the problem of climate change with two numbers, 51 billion and 0. Explain the importance of those two numbers.
Yeah, 51 billion is the tons of CO2 equivalents that we're putting into the atmosphere every year. And that, different countries have different parts of that. Different areas like manufacturing, electricity, transport, agriculture are all part of that. 0 is where you have to get to in order that the temperature stops rising with all the negative effects that causes. And so it's very daunting. If it was only a 30% reduction or something like that, it would be dramatically easier.
You are one of the leading voices who've been warning about the risks of climate change, and you've also, been out in front in warning about the possibility of a pandemic in that TED Talk from 2015.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war.
We're almost a year into this pandemic, and I think about a quotation from Dr. Mike Ryan at the World Health Organization. He made it about a year ago, and he was talking about how to tackle a pandemic. He said, you have to be fast, you have to have no regrets, the virus will always get you if you don't move quickly. What was the cost of us not taking that advice, do you think?
Well, there were mistakes made when we didn't get ready before the pandemic hit. And my 2015 talk was about the infrastructure we needed in place, and even practicing what I called germ games, which are like war games, but you're simulating the disease. It would have been obvious that you have to deploy the commercial diagnostic sector as fast as possible, which the US bungled that. We'll be doing postmortems, and we have to get this pandemic done, and we have to invest so that the next time a pandemic comes, we'll get on top of it, and the number of cases can be kept very small.
What do you hope we've learned from this pandemic that would help us when the next one comes? Because to your point, it's not an if, it's a when.
Now that there's this attention to, wow, we have to be ready for this, the pace of innovation like mRNA vaccines, or there's a way of doing diagnostics that will be 10 times more scalable than anything done before. The amount of innovation, which countries, because they've lost trillions, are now willing to fund the small number of billions needed, we're going to make great progress in global health. And that will help us not just be ready for the next pandemic, it'll help us with polio eradication, malaria, measles, all that area that causes so many deaths, mostly in poor countries.
And you have been a supporter of COVAX, the program that is meant in large part to help low and middle income countries access doses of the vaccines. Canada is planning to take from that pool. Canada has invested in COVAX hundreds of millions of dollars, but is planning to take vaccines from that pool. What do you think of that?
I think it's predictable that when there's a shortage of medical intervention like this, that the rich countries who funded the R&D and trials will be early in line. The only way to really deal with that is to make sure we get big vaccine factories in India going in parallel. You know, if the U.S. is going to keep the U.S. vaccines by and large, and you know, likewise Europe, you know, has responded with a little bit of export restriction when you know the AstraZeneca forecast went down. Fortunately for the world, the biggest vaccine factories are in India. You know, Serum sells 5 times as many vaccines as Pfizer does. They just happen to make $2 vaccines. And so we've done something novel, which is to have the vaccines put into those Indian factories, and those, I call those second source deals. And right now they're making AstraZeneca, but fairly soon they'll also be making Johnson & Johnson and Novavax. So we just need a lot more capacity so that these bidding wars don't determine where the vaccines go.
Is that vaccine nationalism going to prevent or going to delay those low and middle income countries from getting the vaccine, do you think?
Absolutely. The best case is that the developing countries are about 6 months behind in terms of when they reach a certain level of coverage. And the worst case is about 18 months. And you know, we're going through that right now, getting these second sources up. But you know, whenever it comes to health commodities, you know, only governments and philanthropy can stem the normal market outcome, which is, you know, whoever can pay the most is in the front of the line.
Bill Gates, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That is just part of Matt Galloway's conversation with Bill Gates. You can listen to the full half-hour interview at cbc.ca/thecurrent. Next, we take a closer look at the fastest vaccine rollout in the world.
Israel is the first country to see real evidence that the vaccine is having an effect on numbers of the pandemic.
How did Israel vaccinate so many people so quickly? And later, a historic moment for African Nova Scotians, raising a flag for generations past and future.
If you look at what's happened in the last few weeks, it's been an unbelievable effort by the NHS.
Well, that is British Prime Minister Boris Johnson praising the UK's National Health Service today. The country has now given at least 1 dose of vaccine to 15 million people. Those shots have gone to vulnerable people, including healthcare workers and those over the age of 70. The rollout is now being extended to those over 65, and it aims to give a first shot to everyone over 50 by the end of April. Developing countries hoping to get vaccines got a bit of a boost today. The World Health Organization approved the AstraZeneca shot for emergency use. That will clear the way for hundreds of millions of doses through the COVAX program. The global cooperative plans to start rolling out the vaccine to low and middle income countries by the end of the month. And a new study suggests Pfizer's vaccine may be as effective in the real world as it was in clinical trials. The study, involving 600,000 people in Israel, reported a 94% drop in symptomatic COVID-19 infections in those who received 2 doses. That's pretty similar to the results from Pfizer's clinical trials. The study's authors say the findings are preliminary. They have not yet been peer-reviewed. Israel has definitely been rolling out its vaccine program quickly. It is leaps and bounds ahead of most countries, certainly is ahead of Canada. Margaret Evans looks at how it's done it and the challenges that have come with it.
Emerging from the shadows cast by COVID-19. That's the hope, at least, in Israel. The trajectory of the virus slowed, if not defeated, by the fastest vaccination rollout in the world. So fast, Israel is already offering them to anyone aged 16 and over, including Noya Rosenfeld.
I really wanted to because I miss spending time with my grandparents and my great-grandmother, and it was important for me to go back to life.
Operation Back to Life is what the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has dubbed it. staking his reputation, and with both a corruption trial and another election looming, his political fortunes too, on getting the entire country vaccinated by the end of March.
Bye, Corona.
Bye, Corona.
Netanyahu takes personal credit for a deal with Pfizer, the pharmaceutical company promising Israel a fast and steady supply of vaccines for an undisclosed fee and the promise of medical data on patients receiving them.
Israel is the first country to see real evidence that the vaccine is having an effect on numbers of the pandemic.
Scientist Aaron Segal says Israel is in a unique position to provide Pfizer with a database that could offer insights into the potential for a country to reach herd immunity. It already has a highly digitized public healthcare system and is small enough to remove some of the logistical challenges of a swift rollout. But it's not all smooth sailing. Infections are still stubbornly high in some quarters, thanks in part to the faster spreading variant first identified in the United Kingdom.
If it weren't for the vaccine, we would have seen a significant increase in hospitalizations and cases among the older age group.
Authorities have also struggled to enforce lockdown measures in the ultra-Orthodox community in particular. This was the funeral of a prominent rabbi in January. Vaccine uptake is also lagging in the ultra-Orthodox community and amongst Arab or Palestinian Israelis and young Israelis in general.
Risk perception among the young people, the risk is low for them. So this is why they don't think that they should get the vaccine.
Itamar Grotto says public health officials are looking at incentives to encourage people to get the vaccine. More freedoms during lockdown, for example, for those inoculated. He also says epidemiologists are urging the Israeli government to provide vaccines to the Palestinians.
The experts who give advice to the Ministry of Health, all of them are saying, and of course I totally agree, that this is an important both on the public health view as well as humanitarian.
The breakneck speed of Israel's vaccination campaign has opened up a heated debate over the country's responsibility towards Palestinians in the occupied territories, land captured by Israel back in 1967. Israel has offered vaccines to Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem, and it's earmarked 5,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine for Palestinian healthcare workers in the West Bank, 2,000 of which were delivered in early February. Human rights advocates say international law obliges Israel to provide all Palestinians in the occupied territories with access to vaccines as an occupying power. Israel disagrees, government officials saying it's up to the Palestinian Authority to do so, citing the Oslo Accords of the 1990s that set out interim rules ahead of a Palestinian state that has never materialized. Dr. Ali Abed-Rabo is a director at the Palestinian Ministry of Health.
We, as the Palestinian Authority, asked through the WHO, not directly, that Israel as occupying force have the mandate to provide the Palestinian people in the occupied territory with the vaccine.
Russia donated 10,000 doses of its Sputnik V vaccine to the Palestinians, who are also waiting on 37,000 doses from the global vaccine sharing scheme known as COVAX. It's a drop in the bucket when you consider 3 million Palestinians in the West Bank and an estimated 2 million in Gaza. Some Palestinians say they'd rather their leaders not ask Israel for help. Others believe Israel will offer it in the end out of its own interest.
It is not going to be easy to contain this epidemic without taking care of the other half, because the borders are very close. So
about 130,000 Palestinians cross into Israel and its settlements in the West Bank for work on an almost daily basis when COVID restrictions allow, and some employers are lobbying the Israeli government to offer vaccines to those workers. For now, though, there's no sign of that. Israel has begun easing its latest lockdown, but health officials warn it's still a delicate balancing act, with infections still high amongst those under 40. And even those eager to get a vaccine know they might still have to live with restrictions for some time to come.
All the mutations that are coming and that we have, and so it's just really no one knows what's going to happen tomorrow or even later today.
The return to normal promised by Benjamin Netanyahu is still some way off. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
Grocery shopping in Canada stepped into a whole new world today with a throwback to the milkman's door-to-door service. Big-name brands in reusable containers delivered and picked up at your home. But are consumers ready to buy in?
I'm Jamie Poisson, and tomorrow on CBC's daily news podcast Front Burner, we go to Newfoundland, where the coronavirus variant originally found in the UK has spurred an unprecedented outbreak. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back. A big test for reusable containers arrived in Canada today. An online supermarket has joined forces with grocery giant Loblaws. This is a modern take on a milkman's door-to-door service. But as Shoshana Reid explains, it is also a big gamble.
Doorstep delivery. Everyday grocery items in stainless steel, glass jars, and durable containers. But instead of a toss into the recycling bin, these containers are going to be picked up and used again. It's a concept the Canadian founder of Loop is selling to big-scale retailers.
The world's biggest organizations who are manufacturers and retailers are taking it very seriously.
Loop's reusable packaging concept has already taken off in the US, the UK, and France. Now, customers in Ontario can test it through online delivery with grocery chain Loblaws.
You can only enter Loop as a manufacturer if your package can sustain 10 or more reasonable full trips. And if it one day breaks, then the materials have to be recyclable back into that same package.
Customers pay deposits for reusable containers, like this Häagen-Dazs stainless steel ice cream bin that can be reused up to 100 times. The goal? To divert waste from ending up here.
And you know what's exciting too about this? Is that it's being led by industry, by companies. It's not being led by government.
Environmentally friendly concepts like this have been embraced by small businesses across Canada. Former marine biologist Brianne Miller opened Nada, a zero-packaging grocery store 5 years ago. Her customers can choose to order their products in donated used containers.
More than 95% of our products that are going out the door, people are choosing upcycled packaging.
Miller says she's excited to see a large-scale grocer in Canada offering a reusable option.
They ultimately do have the opportunity to influence a huge number of people.
The challenge now, getting consumers on board.
How do you get people to actually literally buy into this? Because there will be a cost to doing so. And it's not only just financial cost, but they have to change their behavior.
Loop and Loblaws says if the online pilot is successful, they'll bring the reusable options in store later this year. Shoshana Reid, CBC News, Toronto.
Next on The National, a flag raising on a Nova Scotia Heritage Day. What this flag means from the artist who designed it. Next in our moment. Well, there's a pretty good chance you have not seen this flag before. It was raised for the very first time today. It is the official African Nova Scotian flag. And the artist, Wendy Wilson, has been working on the design for a decade. Her years of hard work paid off. The story behind the flag and the flag's moment is our moment tonight.
Today was the official flag raising for the African Nova Scotian flag. I designed the flag several years ago, actually. When my daughter was in middle school, she was doing a project on 3 cultural groups in Nova Scotia. I discovered that we were left without a flag. And after, being a very distinct and unique cultural group here in the province, that it was well warranted that we have a flag. I did my research and happened upon a symbol out of West Africa called a Dinkra symbol. And it means it's not wrong to go back for that which you have forgotten. If you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going. And so I wanted to be able to meld, the past, the present, and the future. And so this is an opportunity for us to reclaim what we already own.
And so that flag, if you look at it in the center, Wendy says, is an image of a wave that represents the ocean and the journey her ancestors took. The red is for the blood and sacrifice, the gold for the cultural richness, and the green for the growth. That is a national for February the 15th.